Hello, welcome to day 3 of this 34-day challenge. And in today's message, we're going to be talking about a great verse, and it's actually Psalms 103:14. I'm going to read it. God knows what we are made of. He remembers that we are dust. And it seems like a very simple verse in context, but there's two parts to this verse that I really want to break down. First is he knows what we are made of, implying that God is the one that created us. He knows what we're capable of. And we all are made of dust at the end of the day. And then we come through life and God throws different experiences at us, and it shapes and forms us into who we are today. And there's always the biblical reference / examples of how God basically uses us like potter. He forms us like potter, and like not potter but clay. He forms us like clay. He literally molds us, and at the end of it, we are just a perfect creation that he created. And because he's the one that made us, he knows what we're capable of. So when we make mistakes, God not only is forgiving, but he's understanding. And a lot of times if you grew up in church, a lot of times the practice of church could become more a religious based practice than anything, where you're so focused on the rules, you're so focused on the 10 commandments, you're so focused on what mama and daddy told you not to do and keeping mama and daddy proud. And at some point you started to overlook the relationship that you had with God. And when that happens, it causes a lot of guilt and shame, because we all have flaws. It's almost impossible to be flawless. We will fail over and over again because it is our human nature. We could do everything in our power to be perfect, but perfection is the only person on earth that has ever achieved perfection is Jesus. And there used to be a terminology that people would say is, what would Jesus do? And I remember one time my pastor, he said, he didn't like that analogy because it's impossible to basically achieve what God achieved. And I'm not saying I disagree / agree with not being okay with that statement, but it's just the idea that we almost can't put ourselves in the same bucket as Jesus, because if we do that, we will live in guilt. We will live in shame, because we will be disappointed the fact that we did not achieve perfection as Jesus did. So I think that the fact that God understands that he's our creator it's beautiful, because now he has a lot of grace on us. He has a lot of mercy on us because he's our Father. He's the one that made us. Think of, if you have children, think of that child that you have. Even though there's things that they could do that might not make you happy, at the end of the day, you're always going to love them. That's what unconditional love is. And when you think about unconditional love and the love that God has for us, we also have to look at how we treat other people. The unconditional love that God gives us, we should also be giving other people. It's only right to think of things in terms of how God loves us. Because one thing that we often do is when people hurt us or people do us wrong, we think about how they did us wrong, and we often forget about how God loves us unconditionally. We overlook the fact that God loves us, and we focus on how this human hurt us. And then we go and hurt other people, because the saying is true. Hurt people hurt people. But when you focus on God's love, unconditional love, when people hurt you, you're not going to be hurt, because at the end of the day, you're going to just be focusing on one thing, and that's your relationship with God. So no matter what people do to you, no matter what comes at you in life, you're going to remember that you're still loved by God. And you should be living in that light, as opposed to living in the light of hurt from other people or things that humans throw at you. That's the best way to live in the light of God. That's the best way to just be faithful. And the other thing I really want to talk about is just the fact of like growing up Christian, and growing up, maybe you are the pastor's son or daughter. A lot of times there's a lot of pressure on people that grew up in church to basically live by the rules. And a lot of times that could cause people to be rebellious in a way when they actually grow up and they get their freedom. And because of that, a lot of times the relationship aspect of Christianity is overlooked for people that grow up in church. And it's something that has to be learned over time. And I think God throws life experiences at us. And for me, I basically had to lose a lot of money. I had to quit my job and basically lean into God because I had nothing. And that allowed me to start developing my relationship with God. But even though I grew up in church, this unconditional loving God is something that I never understood, because all that I thought about was, I can't do this, I can't do that. I didn't think about, oh, God loves me, therefore I want to love him back, and I want to do good according to him, because I love him just as much as he loves me. And I would even say it's not just as much. I'd probably say he loves me even more than I love him. So that's the perspective that you really have to focus on. So the second part of the verse, it talks about how he remembers that we come from dust. And when you think about him remembering that we are dust, and it basically shows that like we basically come from nothing. So if God remembers that we come from dust, no matter what we do, God is always going to show grace, because he's like, yo, he came from dust. Why would I be so hard on him? I created him out of dust. So when you think of yourself, remember that when you make mistakes, remember that you come from dust. I don't want that to be an excuse for you to intentionally do wrong according to God, but forgive yourself. Don't live in the guilt. Don't live in the shame. Understand that you're human. And the reason you want to do that, and I kind of mentioned it in prior videos, is so you could live in the light, so you could start living in the light and not be shameful, because the devil wants you to live in darkness. The devil wants you to live in shame. But by you remembering that you come from dust and you've come a long way in your faith with God and in this life, that is how you're going to make an impact in this world.